not being ignored because you're weak. You're being ignored because you're too easy to read. You recognize the moment your presence slips out of the room. It happens fast, almost silently. Someone cuts across you mid-sentence. A joke lands at your expense, and no one intervenes. You start explaining yourself, softening your tone, adding context, convincing yourself you're being composed, reasonable, mature. But the more reasonable you sound, the smaller you feel. And later, it lingers in the shower, on the drive home, in bed at 2 a.m. You replay it, reconstruct it, the sharper reply, the steadier expression, the version of you that didn't rush to be understood. This isn't rare, it's everywhere. At work, in relationships, in families, in quiet conversations where nothing overtly disrespectful happened, yet somehow you still walked away diminished. And this is where most people misread the situation. They think the answer is to become louder, colder, more aggressive. They confuse presence with intimidation. It isn't. Presence is what remains when the need for approval stops leaking out of you. Weak people tend to make one subtle, expensive mistake. They become visibly eager before they become internally grounded. They nod too much, explain too quickly, laugh too early, reveal too much. They hand the room a complete map of their inner world and then wonder why the room stops respecting them. Because once people can read your hunger, they no longer feel compelled to respect your strength. Hunger is predictable. Need is manageable. But there's something deeply unsettling about a person who is warm without being available, calm without being passive, observant without trying to win anyone over. That kind of presence shifts the atmosphere before a single word is spoken. Not because they're cruel, not because they're performing, but because they're no longer asking for permission to exist. And this is the part most people overlook. You're not being tested because you're weak. You're being tested because you're too easy to move. There's a difference. People push where they sense movement. They interrupt the person who clearly wants to finish. They tease the person who clearly wants to be liked. They challenge the person who clearly needs to be right. If every reaction is written across your face, if every emotional shift echoes through your voice, then even average people start to feel powerful around you. Not because they are powerful, but because you've given them access to your balance. And once someone realizes they can alter your emotional state at will, your presence begins to collapse from within. Now consider how most people handle subtle disrespect. Not the obvious kind, the quiet kind. A coworker speaks over you and keeps going. A friend makes a joke that lowers your status just enough to get a laugh. Someone you're dating pulls back and watches, and almost instantly you react. You lean forward, you clarify, you try to fix the moment. But here's the hidden cost. The moment you try to repair how the room sees you, you've already accepted that the room defines you. Now you're operating inside their frame. Now your nervous system is doing their work for them, and that's where most people lose. But the person with real presence does something far more difficult. They don't rush. They allow the moment to remain unresolved. They don't scramble to correct every perception in real time. They can sit in silence without needing to fill it. And that single shift changes everything. Because most social pressure is built on urgency. Explain now, defend now, respond now, prove now. Anyone can appear strong when conditions are easy. The real test is whether you can remain internally composed when the room tries to pull you apart. And when you can, people feel it. Even the ones who pretend not to, especially them. But here's where people often go wrong. They hear this, and overcorrect. They become cold, distant, emotionless. They speak less, but with tension. They try to look detached, but the detachment itself feels forced. And it shows. Real stillness never performs. Real restraint never asks to be seen. If your silence is secretly saying, "Look how powerful I am," you're still trapped in the same system. You still need the audience. You've just changed the type of approval you're chasing. True presence isn't coldness. It's self-possession. It means your warmth is deliberate, not automatic. Your attention is chosen, not given away. You can be kind without becoming easy to handle. You can be open without becoming accessible to everyone. You can smile without losing your center. And this is where most people slip. They confuse warmth with access. They assume that if they stop giving everyone emotional entry, they'll become unlikable. But constant accessibility invites casual disrespect. The room values what it cannot casually consume. And the moment your energy is no longer available available on demand, people begin to adjust themselves around you. Watch closely. When someone lightly disrespects a person with no center, their body reacts instantly. Their eyes shift, their voice tightens. They either collapse into politeness or escalate into aggression. Both reactions reveal dependence, but the person with real weight does something quieter. They register the moment and don't rush to resolve it. Sometimes they respond briefly, sometimes they redirect, sometimes they let silence do the work, and suddenly the dynamic shifts. Because for the first time, the other person doesn't get the reaction they were unconsciously fishing for. And when people don't get the reaction they expect, they begin to reveal themselves. This is why stillness carries more power than dominance. You don't need to take up space if your attention already carries weight. Most people move too much when they feel uncertain. Their hands adjust things that don't need fixing. Their expressions overcompensate. Their entire body negotiates for safety. Presence begins when that negotiation slows. When someone speaks, let them finish before your face reacts. When tension appears, don't be the first to dissolve it just to make others comfortable. When challenged, don't chase it. Let it come to you. Now, this isn't passivity. Passivity is fear wearing softer language. Presence is controlled engagement. You are there. You are aware. You are not disappearing, but you are no longer over-participating just to justify your place. And that distinction changes everything. There's another subtle leak most people never notice. They narrate their struggle too openly. They reveal how hard everything is, how exhausted they feel, how much they've sacrificed. They believe this proves seriousness. In reality, it signals strain, and strain is expensive. People may sympathize with struggle, but they rarely associate it with authority. The more visible your effort becomes, the easier it is for others to imagine your limits. But the people who feel solid operate differently. They carry the pressure quietly. They let the result arrive clean, not because they hide, but because they understand something most don't. Power doesn't announce the process. It reveals the outcome. There's strength in letting people see the finished blade, not the furnace that shaped it. And then comes the deeper realization. But the real problem isn't what you think. It's not that people occasionally disrespect you. That will always happen. The real problem is that your identity is still tied to being seen correctly. You're not just reacting to the moment. You're reacting to the fear of being misunderstood. And once that fear takes hold, anyone can control you. A delayed reply, a cold tone, a raised eyebrow. Suddenly your rhythm shifts. That isn't power, that's dependency, disguised as awareness. This is why some people become impossible to move, not because they lack emotion, but because they stopped outsourcing their self-definition. If you need every room to recognize your intelligence, you will over-explain. If you need everyone to see your intentions, you will over-justify. If you need every misunderstanding corrected, you will live in constant reaction. And people feel that. They always do. The shift happens when you realize something simple but uncomfortable. Not every invitation requires a response. Not every misunderstanding is a crisis. Not every distance is abandonment. Not every slight deserves your energy. And when that clicks, your timing changes. You stop speaking just to relieve tension. You stop reacting just to prove you're unaffected. You stop offering your full interior to people who haven't earned it. And paradoxically, that's when your presence becomes undeniable. Because nothing carries more weight than someone who is no longer rushing to repair how they're perceived. That's where real magnetism begins. Not in control, not in performance, but in the quiet refusal to be moved unnecessarily. And once that shift happens, something changes in every room you enter. People feel it. Before they understand it, they sense that you're no longer easy to influence. Not because you're aggressive, but because you're no longer available for manipulation. That is real presence. Not a mask, not a posture, not a performance. The quiet end of needing too much from the room. And once you experience that, you begin to notice how often your old self used to disappear. How often you explained from fear, smiled from tension, stayed silent from confusion, reacted just to protect an image that was never worth protecting. If this touched something real in you, pay attention to that, because that's where the shift begins. And once it begins, it doesn't reverse.